Okay, so I'm gonna start.
Okay.
So I'm Jackson. Um, I'm a part-time teacher who I kind of spend my evenings trying to figure out what emotions mean. It's kind of a side project I have. By day I teach entrepreneurship to university students, and when I was learning entrepreneurship, I learned all sorts of cool techniques for how to learn from people, and specifically how to learn from people's stories and experiences. Uh, and they won't have a perfect answer to anything you ask. But if they say they were angry on Sunday because someone cut them off, they were probably angry on Sunday because someone cut them off. um, and because there's certain things that people are actually really good at giving you really in-depth stories about. Um, you can kind of build up a bunch of data points to kind of figure out what the heck the overall picture is. It's like, well, they can get angry on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe they just can get angry at any time. um, so for today, I wanted to share a couple of my favorite little theories I got from this method of talking to people, and how you can actually use these kind of stories about emotions to learn faster, do cooler stuff, and then I want to share the technique with you in a more concrete way so that you can go and learn about new emotions to tell me, or any word really. It works on anything that people are experiencing. Uh, yeah. So without further ado, I'm going to hop into my first most favorite emotion, which is worry. Um, and don't worry, it won't take too long to get to the fun part. Uh, so my one-line answer, which isn't much of an answer, is that as far as I can tell, worry is the feeling of consequences. So what I mean by that, it can be, here's a little thought experiment. When you're walking around your house, you're probably not worried about tripping, right? But the moment you walk near a cliff, it's like, hey, left leg, right leg, not today. Um, when you add in consequences, uh, suddenly worry is there to get you to stop acting and start thinking. So I tend to think that worry is basically the feeling of consequences. It's there when there's something at risk, when you feel like you need like there's danger here in some way. The other cool thing about worry is it tends to we tend to have a lot of different names for things that look like worry. I'm fairly sure they are worry, but that's my armchair guess or risky. Um, look at that fall. So one of the spots where worry pops up is actually confidence. So uh, there's kind of two types of confidence as far as I can tell. The first one is the one everyone talks about. It's mastery confidence. The confidence you can do it. Like if you were to go ask an Olympian gymnast, can you do a flip? They'd be like, absolutely, yes, I can do a flip. I'm very good at that. Um, but that's not quite the same as the other kind of confidence, which is if you ask that same Olympian, you know, can you go win the Olympics? Suddenly they're like, I don't know. uh, uh, or the case I've seen is in my teaching program, students will ask me, how do you get the confidence to reach out to people? Uh, and they're like terrified. They're like, if I reach out to them, they're gonna hate me, or I'm gonna bother them. It's gonna be terrible. Um, and so that kind of confidence, they can do it. They're probably fairly confident they can actually like write the words and be fine. But there's a ton of worry there. And so the confidence to reach out to people is actually more of this worry-free confidence. It's the confidence you'll be fine either way. There's not really consequences, success or failure. You'll be okay. Um, and unfortunately, as far as I can tell, the way you build worry-free confidence uh, is by using confidence as crappy cousin bravery, where you feel the fear and you do it anyway, and then everything turns out okay. If you feel the fear, you do it anyway, and everything goes horrible. I think your confidence will be shot. You'll get a very visceral sense for the consequences. I also sometimes call this entrepreneurial confidence because after you lost the second house, you're like, I can do anything. I can survive anything. Another spot where I think worry appears is this term vulnerability, which seems to be so important for close relationships. So if you've heard the term, you kind of to give you a sense of it, there's a bunch of stories which sound vulnerable. Like sharing something you're ashamed of, giving someone a secret, confessing you like someone is very vulnerable. Admitting you need help can be very vulnerable. And specifically, what I think these are all doing is basically doing something that has real consequences for you. Letting the other person, giving them giving them a hammer and saying, "Don't hit me with the hammer." And if they don't hit you, great. You did the bravery thing. You felt worry. You went through it, and things turned out okay. If they hit you with a hammer, it's like, okay, that's not great. And specifically, vulnerability is crucial because my working understanding is that how close you are with someone is actually how much worry-free confidence you have. How much you can just be yourself without worrying what the other person will think or do or say to you, right? You're safe. There's no consequences. You can just be without having to think about everything you're doing. So that's another spot where I think worry actually is very related, if not the same as vulnerability. So what can you do about worry? This is, a lot of people, they're like, I don't like worry. So the first technique is to walk away from the cliff, aka lower the consequences of failure. So this can be, if you're worried about reaching out to people, start out by reaching out to a total stranger, which ironically is easier for a lot of people than reaching out to someone you know, because the consequences to you are very minimal. Like worst case scenario, their day is slightly worse. Versus like if you message a friend, it's like worst case scenario, they think I'm weird. The second thing is to think about things in the grand scheme of things. You often hear this when people are like catastrophizing. It's like if they're afraid of if they're experiencing anxiety, many people with anxiety will think of like, I am just a speck in the universe to counteract it, because if you're just a speck in the universe and everything is meaningless, none of your choices matter. Great. What do you have to worry about? There's no consequences because you experience a rounding error. It's so small, it's not worth thinking about. And the third technique is to think it through to the end. So if everything goes to crap, what can you do to recover? So this is more so the idea of like, if you're making a plan for how to, if you're going somewhere without internet and you're trying to like figure out how to get to a location, you might be worried you're not going to be able to find it, right? But if you have a couple landmarks where you're like, okay, worst case scenario, guys, we're all going to meet by the big tower. If we lose each other, we're meeting by the big tower. Suddenly, you don't have to worry as much because you've fixed the worst case scenario. And the little aside here is, I think number 3 is why we can type so fast on keyboards and phones. When you had a typewriter, a mistake was pricey, right? You had to get white out, you had to, scrap the whole page if it was a bad enough mess up. But on keyboards and phones, backspace, Control Z, it's very, very easy to fix it when you mess up. And when we're texting on the phone, like half of it is typos, and yet you're not really worried about it. Yet when you're speaking in public, every word matters sometimes, and it's a lot more worrisome. But yeah, so that's worry. Worry is one of my favorites because it's very useful to listen to it. When you feel worry, the question is, what are the consequences here? What do I expect to happen? But yeah, I'll give 2 minutes for one question. If you have a question, you can post in the chat or raise your hand. We can chat about it.